Y'all ready? Bow with me. Gracious and good Heavenly Father, thank you for another day. Thank you for one of your days. They're all your days. Let us use them wisely. Let us do things that are pleasing in your sight. Keep your hand on us and guide us in the decisions that we make, not only in this building, but in our lives. Lead, guide, and direct us. Forgive us of our sins. I ask these things in my Savior's name. Amen. If y'all aren't aware of the time, we're running a tad late. Things are going to be different. If you have not asked for your bill, come to the front. Do not get in front of a chairman, but if you have not asked for the bill. The first bill we're going to hear is we've got some unfinished business from yesterday on 170, and we have a technical amendment, and then we have an amendment. Mr. Hamilton, would you like to go through, and you have that on your desk as AM 340677. This is Mr. Hamilton's amendment. Again, I'm going to consider it a technical amendment because all it does is clarify what was in the original thing. And so this will be a technical amendment. Mr. Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, so all it simply does is it replaces line 230 and 231 with this amendment. And this is for federal purposes, and it just clarifies there's a 3-year moratorium, so it talks about what happens on or after July 1st of 2017, what happens to the jet fuel aviation, and that's all it does. There were concerns of the way that it was written before, and we had I offered an amendment yesterday, but on further counsel between the governor's office and Ledge Council, this is the language that has been come up with.
Anybody got any questions of Mr. Hamilton? All right. I'm going to ask that do I hear a motion to approve that? Any opposed to that? All right. What that then becomes is this now becomes 170 becomes a rules committee substitute. So there will be, that's the way 170 will be, as a rules committee substitute. Also on 170 we have an amendment by the majority leader. Is the other page you've got, Mr. Leader?
It's AM 340676. It's on replacing 29.2 cents on line 430 with 24 cents.
Anybody got any questions on that? Ms. Hughley?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What would be the effect of how much that's going to generate?
How much less it will generate, or how much it will generate?
How much less will be generated when we go, it's what, 5 cents pretty much?
One estimate that we had as far as each cent per gallon on a gallon of motor fuel was estimated in this whole deliberative process to be $60 million.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. Do I hear a motion? Got a question? I'm sorry.
I don't have a question on the amendment.
Do it now.
I just want to say something for the record. Embedded now in this bill is legislation to remove the jet fuel exemption, and I just want to express for the record that it would be my very, very strong preference. I'm not going to offer an amendment, but it would have been my strong preference that this be addressed separately as its own bill. I know this is resulting from a serious look at the policy, but it's also come to a head based on some statements that's been made by the CEO of Delta, and we're all mad about them. I'm mad about them. I have philosophical differences with a lot of the things that he said. But I've got a lot of Delta employees in my district, and the things that he says doesn't represent their views. They're a very, very, very important company to my community. It's a very, very, very important company to this state. They've generally been very good corporate citizens, and maybe this is the right policy that we're making here. It's important that we look at our tax code and look at exemptions and credits, and when they have used their usefulness, then we should eliminate or phase them out. But I'm concerned that this has been tacked on out of a little bit of anger towards statements that have been made, and I share that anger. Some of them have been framed around issues that are very, very important to me, and I just absolutely philosophically disagree with those statements. But I just want to, for the record, say it would have been my preference that issue be dealt with separately on its own merits. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We'll go back to Mr. O'Neill's amendment, moving 29.2 to 24. Do I hear a motion? Is there any opposition to that? That will be a floor vote. Okay? It'll be on the floor to vote for that. And as the chair, it's my decision on how these technical amendments come. That's in the bill before today. It was in the bill yesterday. And it's my decision that it will be just a clarification, and therefore I can call it technical. And that's what we'll have on the floor. Any other questions? Mr. Nix. And then some of you might not get to say anything today, but we've heard enough from most of you anyway. Be quick.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 296 on the second page, almost exactly in the middle, would expand the special needs scholarship to a very finite group of refugee students who are here legally but struggling tremendously with culture and language, and this would allow them the opportunity to get the special needs scholarship. So I would appreciate the opportunity to go forward with that bill. Thank you, sir.
Any questions, Mr. Nix? No questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Dudgeon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First time bill, top of page 2, House Bill 34, the Georgia Right to Try Act. This would allow terminally ill patients to have easier access to experimental drugs and therapies if everybody agrees, doctor, hospital, insurance company, patient, and we have liability protection for doctors, and insurance companies are not forced to pay for anything. House Bill 34.
Any questions of Mr. Dudgeon on HB 34? Thank you. Mr. Coomer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Second page under modified structured House Bill 372, Utopian Academy for the Arts, that it would provide that once a charter school has been approved by the state and they've gone through that process and they obtain a certificate of occupancy, a local government could not stop that school from beginning its business.
Any questions, Mr. Coomer? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Mr. Nimmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I bring before you House Bill 319 for your consideration. It's simply the ratification bill dealing with the executive order the governor did related to gas taxes.
Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Efstration.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is on page 2, modified structure, House Bill 328. This bill implements provisions recommended by the Council on Criminal Justice Reform and the Public Defender Standards Council.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Prince, your first time. Relax, enjoy.
Right, Mr. Chairman. On first page, sir, is House Bill 16. This allows magnet school students to participate in Georgia high school athletics at the school in which they're zoned for, provided that their school does not offer such sport. It comes with 3 stipulations: that number 1, that they participate in the local school in which they're zoned for, to eliminate recruiting. Number 2, that they participate in one school, either the magnet school or the local high school, during that 1 year. And the third is that the local school board will have the discretion on whether to implement this or not. This is a no-cost bill as well. Thank you, sir.
Any questions of Mr. Prince? Thank you. Ms. Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. This is on page 2 at the very end of modified structure. House Bill 436. Physicians have a conversation with pregnant women at the beginning and at the end of pregnancy. This adds the third trimester also, because many women are not getting treatment at the beginning of their pregnancy. And it also adds syphilis, which is on the rise in Georgia and is treatable during pregnancy and crosses the placental barrier.
Any questions? Thank you. Ms. Dickerson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the committee, House Bill 131 modifies structures at the top of the page. This bill would just simply add cyberbullying to the existing law that we have on bullying in schools. And I really appreciate your consideration of this bill. Thank you.
No questions. Thank you. Mr. Brockway.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On second page, modified structure rule about in the middle of the page, House Bill 240. This would do 2 things. It was modified in committee, so the caption here is wrong. It would add 1 member. It would request that 1 member of the Department of Community Health Board be a member of the State Health Benefits Plan. The second thing it does is form an advisory committee, an unpaid, uncompensated advisory committee of members of the State Health Benefit Plan that would advise the Department of Community Health on any potential changes to the State Health Benefits Plan. Sailed through Madam Cooper's committee with no opposition, so I'll be happy to answer any questions, sir.
Would those people have a vote?
The advisory board does not, no, sir.
Okay.
Just the 1 member of the 9-member Department of Community Health Board, sir. That's all.
Any questions? No questions. Thank you. Ms.
Thank you,
Ballinger.
sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm here to ask for HB 253. It's in the middle of page 1. It basically allows appraisers to be able to appeal to our state real estate commissioner here in the state as opposed to the federal level.
Any questions, Ms. Ballinger? Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Strickland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, I have 2 under modified open rule. First is House Bill 366, which is 5th from the bottom. It's a cleanup bill to help with efficiency in the Department of Labor and also addresses an issue the film industry is having with privacy of some records.
Any questions on 366? No questions. Thank you. Next one.
Also have House Bill 368, the next one on the list, and this is a straight cleanup bill to strike up part of the code section dealing with the regulation of safety glazing on glass, completely regulated by the feds now. It's taken out of our state code.
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Williamson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm here to ask for House Bill 237. It's on top of page 3. It's an extension of the Angel Investor Tax Credit. Be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Wait a second. Why 5 and not 2 like we normally do?
Sir?
Why 5 years rather than 2, which is probably the norm?
It was just the pleasure of the Ways and Means Committee.
I would probably ask their pleasure that they probably ought to look at that a little closer.
Be happy to, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions? You can do that as a floor amendment. You don't have to go back, but you need to know
Thank you,
that.
Mr. Chairman.
Wait a second. Wait a second. What's the Mr. Powell, I know I have to move it from structure to do it, but I can do that.
Representative Williamson, isn't it true that the reason that the sunset was extended out is that this is one of those things that it takes years before you get any data, so anything shorter than a 3 to 5 year period of time, you really don't have the data that you need in order to evaluate the effectiveness of the program?
There is a 2-year delay in gathering this data as each new year starts.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Williamson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. On the first page right in the middle, House Bill 267 just makes clear to record a security deed, you need a notary public and a witness.
Mr. Powell. You didn't have a question? All right. Any questions, Mr. Kelly? Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Lumsden.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I bring to you House Bill 338. It is on page 1 under modified open rule, 6th item from the bottom. This bill simply provides a local option funding mechanism for electronic citation systems, and it is offered with an amendment changing the sunset date from 2024 to 2020.
Mr. Weldon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Lumsden, this collection of a fee, this is in addition to the fees that are already on the citations, that are included in the citations, correct?
That is correct. It's a technology fee that's a local option.
And this just covers the administration of the court, correct?
This is designed for the purchase of the implementation of the electronic citation systems on a local level.
And that's the administration of the court, not something that's outside of that, correct?
That's correct. It goes through the clerk of court's office.
Thank you.
Mr. Hamilton.
Mr. Chairman, just curious, I would think that an electronic citation would have less of a handling cost and be less expensive than a manual system. Why are we increasing it to cover electronics?
The initial cost of it for most mid-sized to smaller departments is the reason why it's not in wider use than it is. We use it at the state level. We use it with the Department of Public Safety, the DNR. A lot of our larger departments do use it, but the cost of implementation is pretty significant for local budgets, and mid-sized and smaller departments across the state are challenged in trying to meet that cost. So this just provides a local option, a funding mechanism for them to do it.
So just one follow-up. So the cost you're saying is not for the software, it's for the implementation cost? And by that you're saying...
Hardware, software, whatever. With 159 counties, there's some differences between counties as to how they're structured and set up as far as equipment is concerned. So it just is a very flexible approach for them to be able to put in place.
Is it not true, though, that their overall operating costs should go down once that implementation is done?
In the long run, yes.
Mr. Lumsden, is that not the reason you moved your yearly thing from 9 to 5?
That is correct.
It started at 9 years and it's at 5. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Dollar.
Thank you, Chairman. I have at the top of the list HB 245 again for the committee, dealing with the condo assessments.
Any questions on Mr. Dollar?
Thank
you. Mr. Tanner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Back of the first page under modified structure, fourth one down, HB 114, it's driver's license bill I'm carrying for DDS, Mr. Chairman.
You made the comment yesterday that this was not going to affect how things are done right now in certain areas. Mr. Willard, have you got a question?
My point is, I see this as a continuation and now lessening what minimal notice is given to someone that there may be a chance they're going to be arrested. And to have that done without having something appropriate done at the local level, the local courts, where you have the ability for the judge, as well the clerk of the court, to notify this person if they failure to appear, they don't come in, there will be a bench warrant issued. Then upon that bench warrant, let there be an opportunity to have the notice come up to the state for the revocation of license. But too often, I've seen people being arrested who's had their license suspended and not be aware of it and be driving one day, and then all of a sudden they wind up sitting in jail for a day or two. And that's just, I think it needs to be assuring some notice is going out to these people that minimal wise, we had it going by certified mail, now it's being done by just regular mail. Cost savings, I don't think is necessarily the point here. The fact is the local governments need to do more to make sure that there's, by the courts, notice given these people that their failure to appear may cause them to be losing their license as well as perhaps being arrested.
Mr. Benton.
Light just came on.
No more questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Once again, I come to ask for House Bill 115 under modified open on page 1. This bill will most certainly allow some consumers in your districts to avoid foreclosure.
Questions, Mr. Mitchell? No questions. Thank you. Mr. Spencer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Number 2 on the number 2 page is the number 2 bill on the page, House Bill 69, under modified structure. It essentially defines who owns the data in the event data recorder, and in the bill it sets that the owner of the vehicle shall own the data with stipulations. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any questions? No questions. Thank you. Mr. Carson. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, page 2 under structured rule, House Bill 20. This is in regard to low-income housing tax credits to allow Georgia entities to qualify for income tax treatment based on Georgia law, not federal law.
Any questions? Thank you. Donna, who I told you didn't have to stay in line. Go ahead.
To HB 299, sir, is a convenience fee. Be glad to explain it if I need to.
I don't need an explanation, but I sure would like to use a different word.
Okay. I'll be open to
convenience
suggestions.
just doesn't get it. How about
transaction?
Thank you. That would be a word that we could use.
It was worth coming to school today.
Oh, okay. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Belton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I bring to you on the second page, Modified Structure Rule HB 103, the third one down, Kelsey's Law. It basically protects teenage girls from having their personal information put on a pornographic website.
Any questions? No questions. Good bill. Ms. Beskin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm here for House Bill 297 under open rule, the middle bill there. It relates to professional licensing boards and would allow a state licensing board to contract with the National Association of Boards to process its examination applications. I ask for your favorable consideration.
Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the first page under modified open, which is the wrong place for it to be, it should be under structured after it took so long to get an agreement. I asked for House Bill 504. This is a brokered agreement on the vaccines. It would allow pharmacists to give 3 more vaccines without a doctor's prescription while putting in place patient safety factors. I would ask that it be moved. Thank you.
This is 504, and it's under modified open. It'll be under modified structure.
Thank you.
Mr. Setzler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to ask for HB 271, the first time it's on consideration calendar. Bill simply empowers local school boards or empowers the Charter Commission to approve charter schools in the workplace, where community businesses could contribute financially to providing facilities or operational support to charter schools.
Mr. Weldon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the second page under modified structured rule, the sixth bill from the top, House Bill 154, I'd ask for that bill to be put on the rules calendar to be considered. And that just brings parity between the magistrate courts and probate courts with respect to contempt. And then also just about a few down from there, about 6 down from there, House Bill 212 under modified structured rule on the second page, the pain management clinics, healthcare professionals. This just clarifies the rule for CRNAs to conduct their business.
Mr. Willard.
No, sir. Oh, I'm sorry. My phone's sitting there.
I wouldn't want to let you pass up an opportunity to say something. Oh. Ms. Dempsey.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I bring you House Bill 288. It comes as a request from the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Disabilities to add 2 more people to the Behavioral Health Coordinating Council. Those people will be appointed by the governor to allow flexibility. The Coordinating Council meets quarterly. They are truly a collaborative group of experts who work to deliver appropriate and effective services to meet the changing needs without duplication and offering really life-changing opportunities to those who struggle with mental health, developmental disabilities, and addictive disease.
Mr. Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On page 2, under modified structure, House Bill 416, the Consumer Information Awareness Act, same bill from last year. I think we're all in agreement now. The rules chairman may not be in total agreement, but it's
You mean the Scarlet Letter bill? Is that what we?
Well, no, I just.
Oh, okay. I see it.
Okay. Be glad to answer any questions, Mr.
Any questions, Mr. Rogers? No questions. Thank you. Mr. Fleming.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the second page, under modified structured House Bill 377, This deals with the collection of court fines from people who don't pay them. In Georgia, for the longest time, we have allowed local courts to contract with companies to collect those fines. A low-level bureaucrat at the Department of Driver Services questioned whether or not our law actually allowed that. He was rebuffed by his superiors, but it caused enough controversy to make the probate judges and others request that we clarify the law that indeed they could collect delinquent court fines in this matter. That's all it does.
Mr. Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Page 2, modified structure, House Bill 194, an early election bill.
Anybody else? Okay. We're going to set the calendar for tomorrow, Thursday. Under modified structure, HB 504. Have a moved. Any opposition? It's on the front, but it'll go to modified structure. All right. Under modified open, HB 368. Any opposition? It's on. Modified open, HB 366. Any opposition? It's on. Modified open, HB 214. Any opposition? It's on. Modified open, HB 213. Any opposition? It's on. Which one was that? 213? You got a request, Mr. Earhart. I will give you the opportunity if you want to hold it today and tell Mr. Jacobs again how much you're displeased with that. We're holding 213 for Mr. Earhart. Under structured, okay. Go back to 213. We'll put it back on. Mr. Earhart's objection is noted. Mr. Smyrie, you got something?
I'm all in good shape. I pass.
You pass, okay. Was that structured? I got it. I'll put it on. All right, so that means 213 is back on for tomorrow. All right, let's go forward here. Structured. HB 200. I hear move. Any opposition? It's on. Under modified structure, HB 372. Any opposition? Under modified structure, HB 328. Any opposition? Under modified structure, HB 170. Any opposition? You remember that will have it's a rules substitute with an amendment to go on the floor. Mr. Golick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Pursuant to the rule, I'm going to move that the Rules Committee limit debate on House Bill 170, time of debate not to exceed 1 hour plus the initial 20 minutes and the closing 20 minutes. So for a total of 1 hour and 40 minutes, again, including the open, including the close, time to be allotted equally by the Speaker.
You heard his motion. Anybody opposed? All right. So 170 will be on with a 1 hour limit. That's enough.